Marcus Thompson loved the quiet life on his small ranch at the edge of a bustling city. His home sat among rolling green fields dotted with wildflowers in the spring and golden grass in the summer. The occasional bird song and the soft rustle of leaves were his daily companions. Life on the ranch was peaceful, slow, and comforting. He had moved there years ago to escape the noise, the traffic, and the endless pressure of city life. Every morning, Marcus would step onto his porch, take a deep breath of fresh air, and feel at ease. His dog Max, a cheerful golden retriever, would bound around him, barking playfully, ready for the morning walk. Life felt simple and good, but recently an unexpected problem had begun to disturb that peace. Marcus's mailbox, a small wooden structure painted white and trimmed in green, kept getting damaged. At first, it seemed like an accident. Maybe a delivery truck had brushed against it, or perhaps the wind had knocked it down. He fixed it quickly, sanding the wood, repainting it, and reattaching the small brass numbers that read Thompson Ranch. For a few days, everything seemed fine. Then it happened again. The mailbox was bent, leaning at an odd angle, and the letters inside were scattered across the driveway. Marcus frowned as he collected the letters. Bills, letters from friends, magazines, like all ruined or missing pieces. It wasn't just an inconvenience. Some letters were important. He remembered one letter in particular, a notice from his insurance company. When he opened it, he saw that a check was missing because the envelope had torn during one of these incidents. He sighed and thought, "This isn't just bad luck. Something else is going on here." Soon, the pattern became clear. Every time he replaced or repaired his mailbox, it was attacked again. This wasn't random. It wasn't nature or accidents. Marcus began to suspect that the local homeowners association, known for patrolling the neighborhood and enforcing minor rules, might be responsible. They were strict about appearances, lawn heights, fence colors, and even the size of mailboxes. Marcus had always tried to follow the rules, yet he seemed to be singled out. The thought made him uneasy. One hot afternoon, Marcus stood on his porch, wiping sweat from his forehead with a cloth. Max sat nearby, panting lightly. Across the street, the HOA patrol car drove by slowly, its lights off, but its presence undeniable. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He remembered the last time the patrol had passed. They had stopped by his mailbox, leaned out of the car window, and lightly tapped it. The mailbox had stood firm that day, but Marcus had felt the tension in the air, as though they were testing him. Marcus didn't want trouble. He wasn't the kind of person to pick fights. He kept to himself, took care of his ranch, and occasionally greeted neighbors. But repeated harassment, no matter how small, could wear down anyone's patience. He began keeping a notebook by the porch, writing down dates, times, and observations about each incident. It became clear that the attacks were intentional. Someone had a reason, though Marcus couldn't yet understand why. Evenings were the hardest. The ranch, normally comforting in its quiet, felt isolating. Marcus would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, staring at the horizon, replaying each incident in his mind. Max would nuzzle against him, offering silent companionship, but even the dog couldn't ease the tension that had settled over the ranch. Marcus felt a mix of frustration, anger, and helplessness. He knew he had to find a solution, but what could he do against the HOA patrols? Calling them out directly might make things worse. He needed a plan that was clever, safe, and firm. One night, after another long day of repairing the mailbox, Marcus sat on his porch with Max sleeping at his feet. The sky was clear, stars twinkling faintly above, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers from the field nearby. He ran his fingers through his hair and whispered to himself, "There has to be a way to stop this. There has to be a way to protect what's mine." He remembered the first mailbox he had built himself when he moved to the ranch. It was small and simple, but sturdy. Over time, it had become a part of his daily routine, checking the mail, arranging letters, even talking to neighbors who passed by. That mailbox represented more than just a place for letters. It was a small piece of security, a tiny symbol of his independence, and now it was under attack. The next morning, Marcus decided to take action. He began researching different types of mailboxes online, looking for something strong enough to withstand repeated attacks, but also practical for daily use. He wrote down measurements, materials, and design ideas. His mind worked late into the night, creating mental sketches of a mailbox that could endure anything. Each idea brought a small spark of hope. Maybe, he thought, he could turn this problem into a challenge, one that would end in his favor without causing harm to anyone. Marcus also began to observe the HOA patrols more closely. He noticed their routines, the times they usually drove past, and even the angles from which they approached his property. It was a slow process requiring patience, but he was determined. He knew that understanding their behavior was the first step in protecting his home. As days passed, Marcus started noticing small details he hadn't before. Tire tracks in the dirt near the mailbox, small scratches on the post that weren't there before, and even faint marks on the driveway. Each clue confirmed his suspicion. The mailbox incidents were intentional and the patrols were involved. But Marcus didn't feel defeated. He felt a growing determination to reclaim his peace. One evening, his neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, stopped by. She was an elderly woman who lived a few houses down. "Marcus," she said gently, "I've noticed what's been happening." "That's awful. I'm sorry you're dealing with this." Marcus nodded, grateful for the kindness. "I'm going to figure it out," he replied. "I just need to be smart about it." Mrs. Peterson smiled, her eyes kind. Sometimes the best way to deal with trouble is to outsmart it, not fight it. Marcus considered her words carefully. He knew she was right. Anger or confrontation could make things worse. What he needed was a clever, peaceful solution. Something that would protect his mailbox and send a message without breaking any rules. That night, Marcus lay awake, thinking. Ideas flowed rapidly. He imagined a mailbox that could withstand any attempt to damage it. A mailbox that could surprise anyone who tried to tamper with it. He imagined designing it so that no one could easily harm it again. The thought made him feel lighter. He was no longer a passive victim. He was a problem solver, ready to defend his home and his peace in a smart way. Weeks went by and Marcus continued repairing the mailbox while planning his solution. He tested different materials, stronger wood, metal reinforcements, even hidden supports in the ground. He sketched and erased designs repeatedly, determined to get it right. Max, ever loyal, stayed by his side during long nights, sensing the intensity of his owner's focus. Marcus also realized that the problem wasn't just about the mailbox. It was about respect and dignity. His property, his home, and his peace of mind mattered. No one had the right to disturb them, and he would find a way to protect both. He didn't want revenge, only a fair resolution that allowed him to live peacefully. As the sun rose over the ranch one morning, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had a plan forming, and this time it would work. He would create a mailbox that could not only endure repeated attacks but also surprise those who tried to harm it. He smiled at Max, who wagged his tail as if understanding the unspoken determination in his owner. Marcus knew this challenge would test his patience, creativity, and resilience. But he was ready. The peaceful life he loved so much was worth protecting, and he would do it wisely and calmly. For the first time in weeks, he felt confident. The mailbox problem would soon be solved, in a way that no one, not even the persistent HOA patrols, would see coming. And so, with a mix of frustration, determination, and careful planning, Marcus began the first steps toward reclaiming his peace. The ranch was quiet again, the sun shining over the fields, and Marcus knew that a clever solution was on the horizon. The mailbox that had caused him so much trouble would soon become a symbol of patience, intelligence, and quiet triumph. Marcus Thompson had been living on his ranch for years, and yet for the past few months the small mailbox in front of his home had caused him more frustration than anything else he had ever faced. Each time he repaired it, painted it, and anchored it back into the ground, the damage returned. Broken posts, scattered letters, bent metal, and scratches had become an unwelcome routine. Every morning he would wake to see his mailbox lying at an odd angle or letters torn across the driveway. It wasn't just a physical annoyance. It was a constant reminder that someone, or some group, was determined to disturb his peace. Marcus had tried to keep calm. He contacted the local homeowners association, HOA, explaining what had been happening. He made polite phone calls, left messages, and even visited the HOA office once, hoping for understanding. The officers listened politely but offered no real solution. "We'll look into it," they said. "Just make sure your mailbox meets the regulations." It was frustrating. Marcus knew he had followed all the rules. The mailbox was exactly the right size, exactly the right color, and properly installed. Yet the attacks continued. He began to feel a growing sense of injustice. The HOA patrols in their black SUVs with tinted windows seemed to drive by his property intentionally, as though testing him. He noticed their patterns: mornings when they were more aggressive, evenings when they approached slowly, and even specific angles they used while passing by his mailbox. It was deliberate, he realized. They weren't careless. They were persistent. Marcus tried to stay patient, but even patience has its limits. After the fifth incident, frustration began to take a firmer hold. That morning, he had found the mailbox almost completely broken, leaning at an impossible angle with letters torn in half. He felt his hands tighten into fists, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and helplessness. Max, his golden retriever, sat at his feet, tilting his head as if asking what had happened. Marcus knelt to gather the scattered letters and muttered to himself, "Why me? Why my mailbox?" The emotional weight was not just about the mailbox itself. The mailbox was a symbol, a small, tangible piece of his independence. It represented control over his home, over his property, over the peaceful life he had built. Each attack felt like an intrusion into that personal space, a statement that his presence on the ranch was somehow a problem. That thought stung more than any broken wood or torn envelope ever could. After that morning, Marcus sat on his porch for a long time, staring at the horizon. The sun had begun to rise, painting the fields in gold and amber. The wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers, and the occasional crow cawed from the distant trees. Normally, this would have brought him comfort, but today, the beauty around him only highlighted the tension he felt inside. Max lay beside him, resting his head on Marcus's lap, offering silent support. Marcus thought about moving. Perhaps leaving the ranch would end the harassment, but the idea made him shiver. He had worked hard to create a home here, to build a life of peace and freedom. Leaving would mean surrendering to the very forces that were causing him distress. That was not an option. He needed a way to reclaim his space, to defend his mailbox, and to restore his peace, without giving up the life he loved. He started taking notes. Every incident was carefully documented in a notebook he kept on the porch. He wrote down dates, times, weather conditions, and any observations about the patrol cars or officers he could see. Over time, a pattern emerged. The attacks were not random. They followed a schedule, a deliberate routine. Marcus realized he could anticipate their visits, which gave him a small advantage. If he could plan carefully, he might be able to protect his mailbox and finally put an end to this cycle of frustration. Evenings were often spent thinking, sketching ideas, and experimenting with small improvements on the mailbox. Marcus considered stronger materials, reinforced posts, and even hidden supports in the ground. He imagined different designs that would not only endure repeated attacks but also surprise anyone who attempted them. He wanted a solution that was clever, not confrontational, something that protected his property and sent a quiet but unmistakable message. Marcus Thompson would not be bullied or intimidated, but the frustration persisted. Each morning brought the same sense of tension and anger, the same moment of disbelief when he saw the mailbox damaged again. Marcus found it difficult to focus on other tasks. Even caring for his fields, tending to the animals, and repairing fences felt secondary to the ongoing problem. Every trip to town, every letter delivered, every walk to check on the mailbox reminded him of the struggle he faced. One particularly hot afternoon, after yet another morning spent repairing his mailbox, Marcus sat on the porch exhausted. Max lay sprawled at his feet, tongue lolling. Marcus took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. He had learned over the years that frustration was only useful if it led to action. Worrying, yelling, or feeling angry without direction solved nothing. He needed a plan, and a real plan, that would finally give him the upper hand. The idea began to form slowly. Marcus realized that the key wasn't just making the mailbox stronger. It was making it clever. If the attacks continued, the patrols would expect the same old mailbox in the same old place. But what if he could change the rules of the game? What if he could design a mailbox that was unexpected, surprising, and smart? That thought made his pulse quicken with anticipation. He spent hours drawing sketches, measuring dimensions, and thinking about materials. He imagined a mailbox with hidden supports underground, metal reinforcement disguised as wood, and a design that would make tampering difficult or impossible. He even thought about ways to make it gently discourage interference. Harmless surprises that would leave anyone who touched it confused, marking the point that this mailbox was different, Marcus also thought about timing. The HOA patrols followed a schedule, usually passing by in the morning or late evening. If he could anticipate their movements, he could make the mailbox ready before they arrived. He could observe, adapt, and perfect his plan in private. Max would be there too, alert and watchful, the perfect companion for late-night work and early morning observations. But beyond the technical aspects, Marcus understood one deeper truth. This wasn't just about protecting a mailbox. It was about dignity, self-respect, and fairness. His home and his life were under subtle attack, and he had every right to defend them intelligently. Anger alone would not help. Violence or confrontation was out of the question. What he needed was patience, creativity, and perseverance. During this period of planning and frustration, Marcus also began talking to a few neighbors. Some were supportive, others were curious. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who lived a few houses down, often stopped to chat. "You're very patient, Marcus," she said one evening as the sun dipped behind the trees. "I admire how you handle this. Most people would have given up by now." Marcus smiled. "It's not easy," he replied. "But I'm not giving up. I want to find a solution that works without causing trouble. I just need time and patience." Her encouragement helped him more than she realized. It reminded Marcus that persistence wasn't just about fighting back. It was about thinking clearly, staying calm, and preparing carefully. He began to see the mailbox problem not as a series of frustrations but as a challenge, a puzzle he could solve with intelligence and creativity. At night, Marcus would sit on the porch with Max, staring at the star-filled sky, letting his thoughts flow freely. Ideas came in fragments: reinforced wood, hidden metal rods, underground supports, clever positioning, and even a subtle mechanism that would gently surprise anyone who tried to tamper with the mailbox. Each idea built on the last, and slowly a plan took shape. Marcus realized that his patience, observations, and careful note-taking were all paying off. He had spent weeks studying the situation, documenting every detail and imagining solutions. Now he felt ready to act. The mailbox was no longer just a target. It had become an opportunity to demonstrate intelligence, creativity, and dignity. By the end of that week, Marcus had made a list of materials, sketches, and design ideas. He even mapped out how he would install the new mailbox without being observed, using the early morning hours when the HOA patrols were least likely to pass. For the first time in months, Marcus felt a sense of hope and excitement. He would reclaim his peace, protect his property, and do it in a way that reflected his intelligence rather than anger. As he sat on the porch one last evening before starting his project, Marcus looked over the fields, the rising moon casting a gentle light over the ranch. Max lay beside him, tired but content. Marcus whispered to himself, "This time I'll get it right. No more frustration. No more helplessness. This mailbox will be mine, strong, clever, and untouchable." And with that determination, Marcus knew he was ready to begin the next phase of his journey, turning months of frustration into a triumph of patience, intelligence, and careful planning. The mailbox problem would soon meet a solution that no one expected, and the ranch once again would feel like the peaceful, safe place it was always meant to be. Marcus Thompson woke up early one morning, the golden light of dawn spilling over his fields. The birds chirped cheerfully, but Marcus's mind was focused and restless. After weeks of frustration, sleepless nights, and careful observation, he finally felt ready to act. He had a plan forming in his mind, a plan to protect his mailbox, his home, and his peace, and to do so in a way that was clever, legal, and unexpected. The first step, Marcus knew, was materials. He walked into the small workshop he had built near the barn, dust motes floating in the morning light. Tools were neatly arranged on the wall: hammers, saws, drills, screws, and measuring tapes. Pieces of wood and metal were stacked in corners, waiting for the right project. He examined them carefully, thinking about the perfect combination of strength and durability. The mailbox needed to be sturdy enough to resist repeated attacks, yet subtle enough not to draw unnecessary attention. He selected heavy-duty oak for the structure, thick and strong, capable of withstanding any force applied to it. Alongside the wood, he gathered metal rods and plates that could be concealed inside the mailbox, reinforcing it without changing its outward appearance. Marcus even considered designing a hidden base that would anchor the mailbox deep into the ground, making it almost impossible to tip over. Each element of the plan was carefully thought out, each step deliberate. As he worked, Marcus's mind kept returning to the HOA patrols. He remembered their slow drives past his property, their casual glances at the mailbox, and their repeated small acts of disruption. He didn't want revenge, but he wanted a message to be clear. The mailbox was his, and it would no longer be an easy target. His design needed to be clever enough that anyone attempting to tamper with it would be surprised, perhaps even discouraged, without causing harm. He sketched the plans on a large sheet of paper, drawing every angle in detail. There would be metal reinforcements hidden inside the wooden frame, a weighted base underground, and even a subtle mechanism that would make it difficult to tamper with. Marcus smiled as he imagined someone trying to bend the mailbox or knock it over, only to be met with the unexpected durability and strength of his creation. The next challenge was timing. The HOA patrols were predictable in their visits, often passing by in the early morning or late evening. Marcus knew he needed to work discreetly, avoiding the times they were likely to drive past. He planned each step carefully, from cutting the wood to assembling the metal reinforcements to installing the final product in the ground. This was not a rush job. It required patience, precision, and focus. Marcus spent the first morning cutting the oak into perfect pieces for the frame. Each cut was precise, measured twice and cut once, as he often reminded himself. He hammered the pieces together carefully, ensuring every joint was secure. Then he inserted metal rods into the frame, carefully hiding them within the wooden walls. The rods would provide strength without changing the appearance of the mailbox. Every detail mattered. Max sat beside him, watching attentively as if approving the careful work of his owner. Occasionally, he would nudge Marcus's hand with his nose, reminding him to take breaks, drink water, and breathe. Marcus smiled, grateful for the dog's companionship. The ranch felt alive with purpose once more. What had been weeks of frustration now became a project filled with creativity, determination, and quiet satisfaction. By the second day, Marcus had assembled the main structure. It looked like an ordinary mailbox, neat and painted white with green trim, blending in perfectly with the ranch's rustic aesthetic. But inside it was much stronger than it appeared. The hidden metal reinforcements ran through every wall, anchored to the reinforced base buried underground. Marcus tapped the mailbox lightly and heard a satisfying solid sound. This was no fragile wooden box. This was a mailbox built to endure, clever and smart in design. As he worked, Marcus thought about the subtle ways to discourage interference without causing harm. He imagined a small mechanism that might gently surprise anyone who tried to tamper with it. A harmless, sticky deterrent that would mark shoes or gloves, making anyone think twice before touching it again. The idea made him chuckle quietly. It was clever, non-violent, and completely within the rules. Each evening, Marcus reviewed the plan in his mind. He imagined the patrols driving by, leaning out their windows, expecting to see a mailbox that could be smashed. Instead, they would be met with something unexpected, a mailbox that could not be tipped, bent, or easily damaged. His mind raced with possibilities, each one more creative than the last. Marcus felt a thrill of satisfaction. He was no longer the passive victim. He was the planner, the strategist, the protector of his own peace. By the third day, he had painted the mailbox carefully. The white and green colors blended perfectly with the ranch's environment. No one driving by would suspect the strength hidden inside. Marcus applied 2 layers of paint, letting each dry thoroughly. Max wandered around the workshop, occasionally sniffing the new wooden frame and wagging his tail in approval. The ranch was quiet except for the sound of Marcus's tools and the occasional creak of the wooden beams. Installation was the final, most critical step. Marcus knew he needed to bury the base deeply enough that tipping it over would be almost impossible. He chose a spot a few feet from the driveway, slightly to the left of the usual position so it would catch the eye but still feel natural. Digging the hole took effort. The sun was high and the dirt was dry and hard, but Marcus persisted. Sweat ran down his face, but he felt energized, knowing that each shovelful of dirt brought him closer to completing the plan. Once the hole was ready, Marcus lowered the mailbox into place, anchoring the metal rods into the ground and filling the hole carefully with soil. He patted it down, checking the stability. The mailbox stood perfectly upright, solid and unmovable. Marcus stepped back, admiring his work. It looked ordinary, simple, and in no way threatening. But beneath the surface, it was clever, strong, and ready to surprise anyone who tried to damage it again. Marcus didn't stop there. He added the subtle, sticky deterrent, carefully placing it where anyone attempting to tamper with the mailbox would encounter it. It was harmless, safe, and clever, enough to make someone pause and reconsider. He smiled quietly, imagining the reactions of the HOA patrols when they next came by. For the first time in months, Marcus felt confident. The mailbox was no longer vulnerable. It was a symbol of resilience, creativity, and quiet victory. That evening, Marcus sat on his porch, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. Max lay curled at his feet, content and relaxed. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the satisfaction of hard work, careful planning, and determination. The mailbox was ready. The frustration, the anger, and the helplessness that had plagued him for weeks were replaced with confidence, hope, and quiet triumph. He thought about the future. The HOA patrols would come by as they always did, but this time they would be met with something unexpected. Marcus didn't want to cause harm or shame anyone. He only wanted to protect his property and his peace. The mailbox, clever and resilient, would serve as a gentle lesson. Patience, intelligence, and determination could overcome repeated challenges. As darkness fell over the ranch, Marcus reflected on the journey so far. The frustration had been long and exhausting, but it had also taught him valuable lessons. He had learned patience, observation, careful planning, and creative thinking. The mailbox was more than a piece of wood and metal now. It was a symbol of his resilience, his intelligence, and his commitment to protecting what was important to him. Marcus went inside the house, washed up, and prepared a simple dinner. He felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in months. The mailbox would soon fulfill its purpose not just as a practical tool, but as a quiet statement of strength and cleverness. Max followed him loyally, sensing the change in his owner's mood. The ranch, peaceful once more, seemed ready to return to its calm routine. Before going to bed, Marcus sat by the window and looked out at the newly installed mailbox. It stood quietly in the fading light, ordinary to the untrained eye but extraordinary in its hidden design. Marcus whispered softly, "Tomorrow, you'll show them what we've built." Max wagged his tail as if agreeing. For the first time in weeks, Marcus slept with a sense of calm satisfaction, knowing that the next day would bring the first test of their clever plan. The next morning, Marcus woke early again. The air was crisp, the sky painted with streaks of pink and orange. He stepped outside, coffee in hand, and checked the mailbox one last time. Solid, perfect, and ready. He watched the distant road, knowing the HOA patrols would drive by soon. A small thrill ran through him. The mailbox would do its work silently but effectively, sending a message without confrontation. Marcus smiled. Months of frustration, planning, and careful work were about to culminate in a quiet, clever triumph. The ranch felt alive with anticipation. Marcus knew that the mailbox was more than just a structure. It was his declaration of resilience and intelligence. The frustration that had consumed him for weeks had transformed into purpose and strategy. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning air was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers from the fields surrounding Marcus Thompson's ranch. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold. Marcus stepped onto his porch holding a warm cup of coffee and glanced at the newly installed mailbox. It stood there quietly, ordinary in appearance yet clever and strong in design. A silent symbol of his patience, creativity, and determination. Marcus felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. For weeks he had planned, built, and tested his mailbox in private, carefully ensuring every detail was perfect. But today was the real test. The HOA patrols would drive by as they always did, and Marcus wondered how they would react to his clever creation. He sipped his coffee, feeling a quiet thrill. After so many weeks of frustration, this moment represented hope, strategy, and a potential triumph. From the porch, Marcus could see the familiar black SUVs turning onto the road leading to his ranch. He set his cup down, tensed slightly, and focused on the mailbox. Max, his loyal golden retriever, sat at his feet, alert and watching intently. Marcus had anticipated this moment many times in his mind, imagining how it would unfold. Now it was happening. As the first patrol vehicle approached, Marcus held his breath. The officers leaned slightly out of their windows, scanning the properties along the road. When they reached Marcus's mailbox, one of them stepped closer, presumably planning to check if it was correctly installed. Marcus stayed hidden behind the porch railing, observing silently. His heart raced with a mix of nervousness and excitement. The officer reached toward the mailbox, his fingers brushing against the top. Instantly, he felt a subtle surprise. The cleverly hidden deterrent Marcus had installed left a harmless but sticky mark on his gloves. Startled, the officer pulled back quickly, wiping at the sticky substance and looking around in confusion. His partner, standing slightly behind him, furrowed his brow. "What happened?" he asked, clearly puzzled. Marcus could barely contain a smile. He had imagined this exact reaction: surprise, confusion, and the realization that this mailbox was not ordinary. The officers exchanged glances, unsure how to proceed. They poked and tapped the mailbox, attempting to test its stability, but the reinforced frame and hidden supports made it solid and unmovable. Every tap, push, and lean that had previously caused destruction now produced nothing but a firm, unyielding structure. For Marcus, it was a moment of quiet victory. The frustration, the repeated damage, and the helplessness of the past months were replaced with a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. He had anticipated their actions, designed a clever solution, and now watched as it succeeded flawlessly. Max barked softly, almost as if celebrating with him. The officers continued to examine the mailbox, still puzzled. One of them tried to lift the lid, but it resisted easily, anchored securely with the hidden supports Marcus had installed. They tapped it, leaned against it, and even tried to nudge it from different angles, but every attempt failed. Marcus's clever design had worked perfectly. The mailbox was not only sturdy but subtly uncooperative, discouraging any interference without causing harm or breaking any rules. After several minutes of confusion, the officers gave up. They exchanged frustrated glances, then slowly retreated to their vehicle. Marcus watched them drive away, a small smile spreading across his face. The tension that had dominated his mornings for weeks was gone. The mailbox had passed its first test brilliantly. Marcus felt a wave of relief. The clever design and careful planning had worked, and the subtle deterrent had done its job without any confrontation or conflict. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of peace on his ranch. The mailbox stood firmly in place, a testament to patience, intelligence, and thoughtful action. Over the next few days, Marcus observed the mailbox carefully. Each patrol that drove by reacted similarly: confusion, surprise, and cautious retreat. Word began to spread quietly among the neighborhood officers that Marcus's mailbox was no ordinary structure. The repeated damage stopped almost immediately. Marcus realized that his clever solution had not only protected his property, but also changed the behavior of those who had been harassing him. Neighbors began to notice the difference as well. Some stopped by, commenting on the mailbox's appearance. "It looks simple, but it's certainly sturdy," one neighbor remarked. Marcus smiled politely, not revealing the hidden design or the subtle deterrent. He had built it for a reason, and the quiet effectiveness of the mailbox was enough. The satisfaction he felt was private, personal, and deeply fulfilling. Marcus also reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The frustration, anger, and helplessness of the past months had seemed overwhelming at the time, but they had led him to think creatively and strategically. He had learned patience, careful observation, and problem-solving skills that extended beyond the mailbox itself. The experience had strengthened his confidence, teaching him that challenges could be overcome with intelligence and persistence rather than anger or confrontation. Max continued to be a loyal companion throughout. The dog seemed to sense the change in the air, walking beside Marcus during morning rounds of the property, occasionally sniffing the mailbox as if approving its clever design. Marcus laughed quietly, feeling grateful for Max's presence. The ranch felt alive again, peaceful and safe, just as it had when he first moved there. With the mailbox secured, Marcus turned his attention to other projects around the ranch. He repaired fences, tended to the fields, and spent more time with the animals. The sense of accomplishment from the successful mailbox project fueled his energy and motivation. What had begun as frustration and anxiety became a story of triumph, innovation, and quiet resilience. As the days passed, Marcus noticed a subtle change in the neighborhood as well. The HOA patrols no longer stopped frequently or lingered near his property. They seemed cautious, perhaps having learned from the clever mailbox that Marcus would not be an easy target. The repeated harassment had ended, replaced by a mutual respect. Quiet, understated, and entirely non-confrontational. Marcus felt a sense of pride in how he had handled the situation. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, Marcus sat on his porch with Max at his side. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, the wind carrying the soft scent of wildflowers and grass. Marcus looked at the mailbox standing firm in the fading light and smiled. It was more than a practical structure. It was a symbol of his resilience, intelligence, and calm determination. He reflected on the lessons he had learned: patience, careful planning, observation, and creative thinking. He realized that true victory did not come from anger, confrontation, or impulsive action. It came from understanding the problem, thinking ahead, and finding a solution that respected both himself and others. The mailbox had become a small triumph, a lesson in quiet strength and ingenuity. Marcus also felt a sense of gratitude. The challenges of the past weeks had tested him in ways he had not anticipated, but they had also brought growth. He had faced repeated obstacles and frustration, yet he had responded with intelligence, strategy, and calm determination. The mailbox, clever and unyielding, represented all of that, a silent testament to his perseverance and creativity. As night fell over the ranch, Marcus closed the door of his workshop, satisfied with the day's work. The mailbox stood firm outside, ready for any challenge, and Marcus felt a deep sense of accomplishment. For weeks he had endured frustration, repeated setbacks, and uncertainty. Now he had found a solution that worked, peaceful and clever, and his ranch felt whole again. Max curled up beside him as he sat on the porch, looking out at the stars beginning to twinkle in the clear night sky. Marcus sipped a cup of warm tea and reflected on the journey so far. Every challenge, every moment of frustration, and every sleepless night had led to this moment, a small victory, quietly celebrated yet deeply meaningful. The mailbox, ordinary to an outside observer but extraordinary in its hidden design, had become a symbol of Marcus's determination, creativity, and calm intelligence. He had faced repeated challenges and found a solution that was thoughtful, clever, and effective. The HOA patrols had been outsmarted, not through confrontation but through ingenuity, patience, and careful planning. As Marcus finally prepared for bed, he felt a sense of peace he had not experienced in months. The ranch was quiet, the mailbox stood firmly, and the frustration that had weighed on him for so long had transformed into pride, satisfaction, and confidence. Max lay at his feet, breathing softly, and Marcus knew that the next morning would bring a continuation of peace, calm, and quiet triumph. Marcus closed his eyes, thinking about the future. He had learned that challenges could be faced with intelligence, patience, and creativity. Anger and frustration had guided him to a solution, but careful planning and calm execution had brought victory. The mailbox was more than wood and metal. It was a reflection of his journey, his resilience, and his quiet, clever triumph over repeated obstacles. And as the night deepened, Marcus slept soundly for the first time in weeks, knowing that the mailbox had passed its test brilliantly. The ranch was peaceful, his home was secure, and the clever solution he had created had turned months of frustration into a story of quiet, satisfying victory. Days passed on Marcus Thompson's ranch, and a sense of calm settled over the land. The mailbox, cleverly designed and firmly anchored, stood quietly in its usual spot, blending seamlessly with the rolling fields and the rustic charm of the ranch. Marcus walked past it each morning, Max trotting happily at his side, feeling a sense of satisfaction that he had not known in months. What had begun as frustration and repeated harassment had now transformed into triumph, ingenuity, and quiet confidence. For Marcus, the journey had been more than just about a mailbox. The problem had tested his patience, creativity, and determination. Every damaged letter, bent post, and scratched surface had been a challenge, pushing him to think, observe, and plan carefully. Marcus had learned to approach obstacles with intelligence rather than anger, to respond with strategy rather than emotion. The mailbox was proof of that journey, a symbol of resilience and thoughtful action. The neighborhood had also begun to change subtly. The HOA patrols, once persistent and intrusive, had become cautious. They no longer lingered near Marcus's property or displayed the casual disregard that had caused him so much stress. Word had spread quietly among the officers that the mailbox was more than it seemed: strong, clever, and difficult to manipulate. Marcus didn't need to confront them or argue. His solution had spoken for itself. Respect, quiet and understated, had replaced the tension. Neighbors noticed the change as well. Some stopped by to comment on the mailbox, intrigued by its unusual sturdiness. "It's impressive," one neighbor said, peering at the well-painted structure. "It looks simple, but it certainly seems strong." Marcus smiled politely, keeping the details of its clever design to himself. The mailbox's ingenuity was his private triumph, a reward for months of careful planning and patient effort. Life on the ranch began to regain its peaceful rhythm. Marcus focused on his daily routines, tending to the fields, checking on the animals, and maintaining the fences. The weight of constant worry was lifted, replaced by a sense of freedom and control over his home. Max, ever loyal, seemed lighter too, running across the fields without concern, barking happily at birds and rustling leaves. The ranch, once tense with the worry of repeated interference, was alive with energy and quiet satisfaction. Marcus reflected often on the lessons the experience had taught him. Patience, observation, and planning had been essential, but so had creativity and clever thinking. He realized that responding to challenges with thoughtfulness rather than anger created stronger, longer-lasting solutions. The mailbox was more than wood, metal, and paint. It was a representation of the qualities that had helped him navigate the months of frustration: intelligence, resilience, and calm determination. One sunny afternoon, Marcus stood by the mailbox, making small adjustments to the surrounding landscaping. He noticed how the sunlight caught the edges of the green trim, casting soft shadows across the freshly turned soil. It was ordinary in appearance, yet every inch reflected careful work and strategic thinking. Marcus smiled, thinking about how far he had come. The frustration that had once dominated his days now felt like a distant memory, replaced by pride and satisfaction. Max wandered around, sniffing the ground and occasionally nudging Marcus's hand with his nose. The dog's quiet companionship had been a source of comfort throughout the process. Marcus often thought about how much easier it had been to stay focused and positive with Max by his side. Together they had weathered the weeks of stress, planning and careful observation, and together they had emerged victorious. In the evenings, Marcus liked to sit on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky turned shades of orange, pink, and purple, the fields bathed in a warm glow. He would sip a cup of tea, feeling the gentle breeze against his face, and reflect on the months of effort. What had started as a series of small annoyances had become a journey of personal growth. He had learned to face challenges calmly, to plan carefully, and to find solutions that were clever, fair, and effective. Occasionally, a vehicle would drive down the road past the ranch. Marcus would glance at the mailbox, noting how it stood firm and unyielding. The subtle deterrent he had installed continued to serve its purpose, gently discouraging interference without causing harm. The mailbox had become more than a functional structure. It was a lesson in intelligence, patience, and thoughtful problem-solving. Marcus felt proud, knowing that his approach had achieved lasting results. Neighbors sometimes walked by, curious about Marcus's success. "I heard you had a mailbox problem," one neighbor said with a smile, "and now it looks perfect. How did you do it?" Marcus laughed softly, replying simply, "Patience, careful planning, and a bit of creativity. That's all." The simplicity of the answer belied the months of effort, observation, and determination that had gone into the project. The mailbox also became a subtle source of inspiration for the neighborhood. People admired its sturdiness and clever design, though none knew the full story of Marcus's planning. It stood as a reminder that challenges could be faced calmly, solved intelligently, and turned into opportunities for growth. Marcus felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his journey had created not just a practical solution, but also a symbol of resilience for anyone who noticed. Marcus reflected on the emotional journey as well. The repeated attacks had caused frustration, anger, and sleepless nights, but they had also led to growth, creativity, and a deeper understanding of problem solving. He realized that true resilience was not just about strength or force. It was about patience, observation, and clever thinking. The mailbox, standing firm in the morning sun, represented all of that in a quiet, enduring triumph. One evening, as Marcus sat on the porch, Max curled at his feet. He thought about how he had handled the situation. He had not reacted with anger or confrontation. He had not sought revenge or created conflict. Instead, he had planned carefully, acted thoughtfully, and created a solution that was effective, fair, and clever. The satisfaction he felt was deep, quiet, and lasting. Marcus knew that challenges would continue to arise in life. There would always be obstacles, frustrations, and moments of uncertainty. But the mailbox experience had taught him a powerful lesson. Problems could be solved thoughtfully, intelligently, and without unnecessary conflict. Patience, observation, and creativity were more effective tools than anger or reaction. The ranch, the mailbox, and even Max had taught him that every challenge was an opportunity to grow, learn, and demonstrate resilience. The sense of peace on the ranch grew stronger with each passing day. Marcus enjoyed simple routines once again, feeding the animals, tending the fields, repairing fences, and watching the sun rise and set. The frustration of past months had faded, replaced by pride, satisfaction, and a calm sense of achievement. Marcus felt empowered, knowing that he had faced repeated challenges and had emerged successful through careful thinking, clever design, and quiet determination. Max, as always, remained a loyal companion. The dog would sit beside Marcus on the porch in the evenings, resting his head on Marcus's lap, content and peaceful. Together they enjoyed the tranquility of the ranch, free from the tension that had once dominated their mornings. The mailbox had become more than a tool for receiving letters. It had become a symbol of their shared journey, resilience, and quiet triumph over frustration. Neighbors continued to admire Marcus's clever solution. While they did not know the full story, they appreciated the sturdiness, practicality, and subtle ingenuity of the mailbox. Marcus, in turn, appreciated their curiosity and respect, knowing that his work had achieved more than just a practical result. It had created a small lesson in patience, intelligence, and problem-solving, quietly, effectively, and without conflict. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus often reflected on the journey. What had begun as a frustrating challenge had become a story of personal growth, clever problem-solving, and quiet satisfaction. He had learned the value of observation, careful planning, and creative thinking. He had learned that challenges could be overcome not with anger, but with intelligence, patience, and persistence. The mailbox remained firm, clever, and unyielding, a constant reminder of the journey Marcus had undertaken. It symbolized resilience, creativity, and the quiet triumph of thoughtful action. Marcus often glanced at it with a small smile, proud of the months of careful planning, hard work, and intelligent problem-solving that had gone into its creation. One afternoon, Marcus decided to take a walk across his fields, Max bounding happily beside him. The ranch felt alive, peaceful, and secure. The frustrations of the past month seemed like a distant memory, replaced by calm, satisfaction, and a sense of accomplishment. Marcus knew that the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever: patience, observation, intelligence, and clever problem-solving. In the evenings, Marcus would sit on his porch watching the sun set over the fields, the sky painted in warm, soft colors. Max would curl at his feet, breathing softly, and Marcus would reflect on the journey that had brought them here. Every challenge, every moment of frustration, and every sleepless night had led to this moment: peace, satisfaction, and quiet triumph. Marcus realized that the mailbox was more than a practical structure. It had become a symbol of personal growth, clever thinking, and resilience. He had faced repeated frustration, but through careful planning, observation, and patience, he had created a solution that worked. The HOA patrols had been met not with anger or confrontation, but with intelligence and creativity. Marcus smiled, feeling the deep satisfaction of a challenge overcome thoughtfully and effectively. As night fell, Marcus closed his eyes for the first time in months, feeling a calm satisfaction that came from a challenge met and a problem solved. The ranch was peaceful, the mailbox stood firm, and his home and property were secure. Marcus knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but he also knew that he now had the tools: patience, observation, creativity, and determination to face them successfully. Marcus drifted to sleep with Max at his side, knowing that the clever mailbox had done its job. The months of frustration, careful planning, and patient work had led to a quiet, satisfying triumph. The ranch was once again a place of peace, calm, and confidence. And Marcus knew that he had faced the challenge with intelligence, grace, and cleverness, a victory that would remain with him forever.